Hello and welcome back to the NBA Draft slash offseason edition of Heat Check. I am John Devine. With me is Anthony Chang, and we may as well dive right into it.
Yep.
First and foremost, the NBA Draft. This is being filmed on Thursday, so the first round of the draft is over. The Heat. Well, if you're looking at the people who are people who grade these things, the Heat lucked into something at number 20. With Casper, and I'm not even going to say his last name because
Jakucionis.
Yeah, what he said.
I've been practicing.
Yes, bless you. So, for those of you who don't know, played 1 year at Illinois, 6'6" guard, big guard. We'll talk more about the measurables in a minute. I'm going to let the expert do that. And more importantly, he cannot trade him for 30 days. And why is that important? Because Kevin Durant, for the fourth time, he is not coming to the Miami Heat. So if they have any trades in mind, they would have to wait 30 days if they want to include this pick. But let's start with the fact that he may well be on this team. What do you see in our first round draft pick, and how can he help this team?
Yeah, this team was in desperate need of offensive creativity, right? We've talked about how bad they've been on offense the last 3 years, bottom 10 offense in the league. And they've needed passing. They've kind of missed Kyle Lowry since Kyle Lowry, it's kind of crazy to say because I know fans wanted Kyle Lowry out, but Kyle Lowry's passing and getting, Bam and at back then Jimmy like in good position for an easy basket, like those are big. They haven't had a really good passer since the Lowry trade. Cass, as we're going to refer to him for the rest of the episode, is a great passer. Very, very good in pick and rolls, was used in pick and rolls more than any other player in the country last season. Very high usage, kind of excels, with a ball screen as an attacker. He's a good finisher on the basket, can pass with either hand, some flashy passes. So the Heat needed passing, they needed creativity, and they're getting that. And, this guard has size, 6'5". I think many think he'll probably be a point guard at the NBA level, but he could also play off the ball, right? You obviously have Tyler Hero. You might have Davion Mitchell. You still have Terry Rozier. So there's a bunch of guards in the roster still. Maybe Drew Smith just comes back. He might need to play a little more off the ball early in his career, but I think the hope is he can develop into a point guard. And you've already seen some comparisons to Goran Dragic, right? Who's a really familiar name. Obviously another European player. Kind of has that same, doesn't have the great athleticism, but just good footwork, nifty, plays at his own pace, creative, at finishing around the basket. Probably might be a better passer than Goran even. So I would say the biggest things that help the Heat are his passing and just his creativity with the ball in his hands and being able to really excel in pick and roll situations, which is obviously a big part of today's NBA game.
Okay, let's talk about a couple things that you didn't mention. His shooting.
Yeah.
From what I've read, in the half court, he has gotten to the basket, but has never dunked in the half court at 6'5", 6'6".
He's not very athletic. That's definitely one of the concerns.
And the final nail in the coffin. What about defense?
Yeah, so the shooting is interesting because I think he shot 31% on threes last season in Illinois. Obviously not good. He was shooting 40% through January 1st. Then he had this forearm injury that he was battling for the second half of the season, and his efficiency plummeted to where it got down to 31% by the end of the year. The Heat, I asked actually Adam Simon this, who kind of leads the draft intel team for the Heat. He spoke to us last night after the pick, and I said, well, how do you project him as a shooter? Because there's kind of some uneven numbers, and he said their analytic team thinks he could be a really, really good shooter. And while there are some things in his game obviously he needs to work on, which we'll talk about, defense is one of them, they don't think outside shooting is going to be a problem. So they're pretty confident that he's going to be fine as a three-point shooter. From what I've heard of talking to people who have watched him at Illinois, even coached in Illinois, I've talked to somebody, they say that he's already a really good shooter off the dribble, kind of a pull-up shooter. Really has a really good step back. The one thing he's going to have to work at is catch and shoot game, which again, he's 19 years old. He just turned 19 at the end of May, so he's really young. He's been playing with the ball in his hands a lot, right? Again, a very high usage player at Illinois last season. So he hasn't been used in those situations much where he's asked to catch and shoot. So that's going to come with reps, going to come with experience in that role. So I, from everyone you talk to, they're not concerned about his shooting. They think that's going to come around. And it seems like we look at the two kind of segments of the season before the injury, after the injury. Last year was the forearm. It kind of correlated with his drop off with his outside shooting. So you hope that, as he's healthy, those numbers will stabilize a little bit.
Okay, some of these experts had him within the top 12. I think I saw three of them, like two of them had top 11. One of them had 7.
Yeah.
I know I looked at ESPN today, and they were showing, like, I guess they named 2 people who they thought were steals of the draft so far. One was up in Phoenix, and that was the big man from Duke, and the other one happened to be the Heat. If it is, I guess, comparison-wise, what do you see it for his ceiling? What do you see for his floor? And finally, where do you see him fitting in with this rotation for what they have?
Yeah, I mean, his ceiling, it's so hard to say, right? I mean, I guess a Goran-type player, like a starting point guard in the NBA, that's probably his ceiling. A guy who can lead an offense. Maybe not as a top scorer, but just as a passer who can run a really efficient offense. His floor, I guess, a backup point guard, right? A guy maybe who plays in second units and leads second units. But it does seem like he has the skill set to be definitely a rotation player at some point in his career, right?
Okay.
I mean, you look at the Athletic, they had him at number 7, the number 7 best prospect in this class, and a really talented class, by the way. The Ringer had him at number 7 in their big board for the top 100 players. He was supposed to be a lottery pick. Some guys had him in the top 10. Again, he didn't even work out for the Heat. He tried to get him to work out at the Kaseya Center. He basically said no, not because he didn't want to go to Miami, but he just was like, I'm not going to work out for a team with a 20th pick. I'm not going to be there. So it was kind of unexpected that he fell to them, and the Heat were fortunate enough that he did, and they obviously pounced on it. Again, I think you saw all the Walter Clayton buzz because the Heat needed – it's crazy to say because they have a lot of guards, but they needed another guard who can help run an offense. That was a need on this team, for this offense, and you're getting that now, and a guy they really didn't expect to be there at 20 before the draft.
So that's funny. Let's talk about Walter Clayton Jr. For those of you who only hit on this every once in a while, lead guard for University of Florida, national title winner. A lot of experts had him coming here. And I guess Danny Ainge and the Jazz noticed that too because they traded up to 18. I guess that old Lakers-Boston rivalry will never die. And they went up and snatched him. So, but like you were saying, most people did not expect Kaz to be there at number 20. So, they may have saved themselves from this issue, which is good. So I'm looking at the guard rotation. Obviously, you have Tyler Hero, who passes well. He's kind of a combo guard, but not enough to necessarily run the offense full time. You have Davion Mitchell, if he comes back. Defensive first guy, shot a lot better than we thought. Gets to the hole a little bit. You have Terry Rozier, who's there, but the best thing I can say about him from last year is he's a nice expiring contract. Right. And maybe you can get something else for him. Drew Smith is coming off an Achilles pop, which is very popular these days, apparently, because everybody's getting them. So you have those. So it looks like at this point in his development, you have a lot of mixing and matching Spo would have to do to get the combination of what you would really want on any given moment. And I guess, but that's how Spo is anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's 19. Is he going to play right away? We've seen, right? It picks. Khalil Ware came in, didn't play immediately, right? I mean, there's a lot of rookies that come in that are even older than 19 that don't get to play until December or January. So would I be surprised if opening night is on the rotation? Definitely not. I would not be surprised, right? He's going to need some time to adjust to the NBA game, especially with the way he plays as a guy that plays with the ball in his hands, right? You can't just hide him in a corner. He's got to play with the ball in his hands. So I wouldn't be surprised if, you start the season out of the rotation. But I think there will be time for him to play. I mean, look, he could play next to Tyler Hero because Tyler Hero, as we know, is probably best off the ball. That was his best stretches last season was when Jimmy was playing and Tyler was playing off the ball and getting a bunch of catch and shoot opportunities and attacking closeouts. So this gives Tyler the opportunity to do that. You could play him with even Davion Mitchell. Davion's back. He had, Cas brings size. Davion can play a little bit off the ball as well. They could kind of play off of each other. So I think there's some versatility there because of the fact that he's 6'5", can obviously play with the ball in his hands, take some of the pressure off of the other guards, and also is going to learn how to play off the ball as well because we know that Spo kind of runs the offense obviously through Tyler, through Bam. He's going to continue to do that. He's not going to just give a 19-year-old rookie the keys to the offense. So Cas is going to have to learn that type of role. But I do think he'll get some playing time. But it is a deep backcourt. I mean, we can't forget about Drew Smith, who probably will be back, likely on a two-way. He was a really good player for them before the Achilles injury. He had turned into a consistent contributor, great defensive player, was running the offense. So if he's healthy, it's another guard. And again, you still have Terry Rozier, who, say what you want about him, but he's the fourth highest paid player on the roster. Has some talent. Like, you would hope he has a bounce-back season. So if he does have a bounce-back season, does he get in the rotation? Pelle Larsson, you didn't mention him. Second-year player who was in another rotation this year. The Heat have high hopes for him. So it's not like he's just going to be giving this 25-minute leash, right? He's going to have to earn it. It's a kind of a crowded backcourt. But I do think just because of his skill set and the fact that they need that skill set, he'll get some time for sure, which is going to be important, to his development.
So Riley has been here 30 years now, right?
Yep.
If we looked at the first 20 to 25 of them, he was heavy in the veterans. Traded for Alonzo Mourning, just traded for Shaq. Made these, obviously, signed LeBron, signed Chris Bosh, and all. He always seemed like he wanted proven veterans. But if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time since like 20 years ago they have made a first-round pick 4 years in a row.
Yep.
Is this lining up for something else? Because let's be honest, in the early 2000s when they did that as well, all of a sudden they changed some of these things. Some of these young players are what they used to trade for Shaq. These young players, they had used, Caron Butler carved out a lovely career. It wasn't all here. But do you see it setting up for something bigger? Or do you see let's ride and let these guys grow?
Yeah, the last time this happened was, you mentioned it, basically 20 years ago. 2002, Caron Butler. 2003, Dwayne Wade. 2004, Dewar Wright. 2005, Wayne Simeon. Dwayne Wade obviously turned into the greatest player in history, so that helped. You turned Caron Butler in a package with others to trade for Shaquille O'Neal. This group, Cass, Khalil Ware, Jaime Jaquez, Nikola Jovic, those are the last four picks. Could they be used in a trade? Sure. If they're, if Giannis becomes available, let's say, and they want Khalil Ware and another, this year's first round pick, maybe that happens. But I think you're seeing the Heat pick a direction here. They now have 7 players 25 years old or younger. Those 4, Kashad Johnson, who just guaranteed his salary for next season, Pelle Larsson, last year's second round pick, and Tyler Hero. People forget Tyler Hero is just 25 years old. That's 7 players now, 25 or younger. So this team is getting younger. Everyone wants them to rebuild. I think they're kind of doing that while not tanking, right? Which is kind of hard to do in today's league. I don't know if it's going to work, right? There's some conflicting views on that, but it seems like they're trying to rebuild on the fly here while still trying to compete. But the fact they made a pick, it's important. In today's league with the new CBA, having cost-effective talent like rookies on rookie scale contracts that basically you're under contract with that team on a cheap salary for 4 years is important. And now the Heat have 4 of them on their roster. I think if anything, this is kind of different than what the Heat have done in the past. But I think this is a product of the new CBA and how much more important these draft picks are because of the contracts they're on, and also the fact that the Heat see that they got to kind of retool and rebuild here, and they're going younger.
it feels almost like the football salary cap, where we would say the most valuable thing in football is having a quarterback on a rookie contract, because then you can build all over the place. Now, we can't necessarily do it by position, but maybe one of the most valuable things is having a young star on a rookie contract before you hit these aprons. Yep. I guess we are lucky we have Andy Ellsberg and we have those salary cap gurus who understand the first and second apron, what it means more than any of us do. But I guess the big thing is, and we can talk about this with Kevin Durant, is when do you pull the trigger? Okay, you're acquiring all these young assets. You know, it looks like the Heat is acquiring more of the assets than the draft picks. Brooklyn Nets had 5 first-round picks last night. Now, are they? You know, they weren't 5 lottery picks. So the further down you go, the bigger the crapshoot it is. But if you're looking at that, and we were talking about the Kevin Durant trade, and people always exaggerate, but they were like, "Oh, well, the Heat wouldn't necessarily give up Haywood Highsmith to get Kevin Durant." I have a feeling they would give up Haywood Highsmith 3 times over. Nothing wrong with Haywood Highsmith, don't get me wrong, but he's not Kevin Durant. What do you think is their hesitancy to pull a trigger? And let's talk about how, where they stack up. I mean, you have Oklahoma City that just won the NBA championship, and they still have draft picks all over the place. You look, the number 1 pick was Dallas. Dallas still has Kyrie Irving. They still have the Brow, and they got the number 1 pick in Cooper Flag. Actually, all the Texas teams now are loaded. You look at Houston, they ended up with Durant. You look at San Antonio, they got the number 2 pick, and they have plenty of picks. And if they wanted to go get Giannis, they can probably offer a better package.
Oh, yeah,
so
for sure.
Realistically, what are the Heat's options?
Yeah, they're in a tough spot, honestly. I think with Durant, they were scared off by his age. He's going to be 37, I think in September. Obviously, his injury history. And I also think when you're discussing a trade like that, the potential of a trade like that, you think, okay, what are we going to be after we make the deal? If we trade away Jovic, Ware, Wiggins, a first-round pick, and maybe like Rozier or somebody, or maybe Hawkins, let's say, what are we going to be left with? And I think, and Adam Simon mentioned this last night. He wasn't talking about the Kevin Durant deal, obviously, but he was mentioning how important depth is now in today's NBA. You saw it with the 2 teams in the finals. Indiana probably didn't have a top 15 player in the league this year, but incredibly deep. They had waves of talent coming off the bench. The Thunder, yes, they had the MVP, but they had 9 deep of pretty much 2-way guys that are just really good. Probably the deepest roster in the league. Depth is important. So I think that he came to the realization of, is a Bam, Tyler, 37-year-old Kevin Durant good enough to win a championship? Probably not, right? Probably not. So I think that's why I didn't make the trade. I think that's why it makes more sense for Houston, which Houston was the number 2 seed in the West last year with a top defense that needed some offensive punch. Obviously, Kevin Durant provides that. They are a contender now. They were a contender before, and now they're even more of a contender with KD. So I think that was the biggest thing. As far as where the Heat stands now, you're kind of waiting. And the issue is, like you said, if a hypothetical situation comes up where Giannis is available in a trade in a few months, does the Heat have enough to get a deal done compared to other teams? Probably not, right? Like you said, San Antonio has a ton of assets they can throw in a deal. They have young players. They have picks. So they're in a tough spot. But I think for now, the Heat is just trying to build up that cupboard, right? They're adding young talent. And they're hopefully, they get better. And Khalil Ware turns into something more, and he's even more valuable next offseason. Or this rookie, it has a really good rookie season, and he's coveted by other teams. As you go on in the years, you have more picks open up that you could trade. So there's nothing that he can change from what they did in the past, right? Right now, it seems like they're trying to be proactive of adding young talent, trying not to trade away picks, right? We saw in the KD deal, they didn't want to trade away multiple picks for KD. So you're seeing them trying to build that, their assets up, but it is going to take some time. This offseason, if a top star becomes available, it doesn't seem like the Heat would have enough unless that star demands a trade to Miami and Miami only. And even then, that team has to like kind of fulfill that wish, right? We've seen that with Damian Lillard. That didn't necessarily work with Dame. He wanted to come to Miami. He ended up in Milwaukee. So, it's gonna take some patience here for Heat fans and the Heat organization to do this process.
And if I'm a Heat fan, and I really want Giannis, I'm not holding my breath. I just keep looking at San Antonio, and they had Rookie of the Year Stephen Castle. The number 2 pick, who was Ron Harper's kid, they play the same position. Okay,
Yep.
So if you do that, no offense, they can let him go.
And De'Aaron Fox, by the way, too.
Yeah. Oh, I wasn't even counting the point guard.
Yeah.
So you have a loaded backcourt. Even if you get rid of one of those, the Rookie of the Year, or maybe this year's, first team all-rookie player, if everything goes well. And then they have a bunch of picks. Then they have guys on the front line too. There's so many names to go through, but they have all sorts of options that they can pick up. And how would the Heat match? If you match it, then you have thrown away what depth you have. And like you said, with Indiana and Boston, and let's be honest, the East is open this year or this coming season because Indiana lost their star to a busted Achilles.
Yeah.
Boston lost Jason Tatum to a busted Achilles, and they got rid of Kristaps Porzingis, and they got rid of Jrue Holiday, even though they got Anthony Simons back. I get it. But that's a big hit to their depth. I always said it. I always loved Kevin Pritchard for what he is. And that was always somebody I was like, there's a role for him someplace else.
6-man.
Where you could get a lot of usage out of him. But look, now they're just pulling him off the back, and it's like, oh, you may have to play 30 minutes instead of 20. Maybe the Heat, if everything works out with that backcourt, that's what they can aspire to. But it's a process.
Yeah,
and it's
a process. Yeah, and it's not as easy as it used to be just to microwave a super team where you just hoard $100 million in cap space and sign 2 max players like the Heat did with the big 3, right? Or back then 3 max players. Free agents don't hit. We've touched on this many times before, JD, but free agents don't hit. Stars don't hit free agency anymore because there's so much incentive to sign extensions before they become free agents where now you have to trade for them. And that's not as easy because then you're dealing with another team and that team has to like what you have and you have to have enough to get that star. So it's just a different way of doing things, and Heat have had to adjust we have to manage our assets and collect assets. So when the opportunity does come around to get a Giannis, to get another Anthony Edwards, to get whatever star, we do have enough to get in the game. Because they've been in the game. Most of these stars that become available want to go to the Heat, right? The Heat are always on the list, always for Kevin Durant, for Dame, for Bradley Beal. You name it. James Harden back in the day. They're always on the list. It's just they haven't had enough to close the deal, or they haven't been willing to give up enough to close the deal, and that's been the issue. So I think what you're seeing now again is the Heat trying to build their cupboard of assets so they can be more in the game moving forward.
And teams don't want to lose it for nothing. That's the bottom line.
Yep.
You get to free agency and it's like nothing. It's like, no, look, we want to get something back. We have had this asset for years, and now we're just going to let it go? No. And I can't say that I blame them, but if you're a Heat fan, do you think the front office was slow to adjust their way of thinking considering the current salary structure and the current CBA, or it's just that it's a combination of bad timing and bad luck?
I think that Jimmy Butler, with Jimmy Butler in the roster, they were just going for it because they felt like they had a title contender, right? And they kind of did. They went to 2 finals. So how could you argue against that? They were just trying. They weren't living in the big picture long term. They were living in the now during the Jimmy Butler era of trying just to add to the roster. Obviously, you give a first-round pick for Terry Rozier, hoping he could be the missing piece, a guy that could, give you a scoring jolt. Obviously, it hasn't worked out, but they were living in the now with Jimmy Butler. And everything that happened with Jimmy Butler last year kind of had to force the Heat to change their thinking. Where now they're thinking more big picture. We're hearing that they're shopping Andrew Wiggins. Can they get off of Andrew Wiggins' contract so they can open up more cap space next offseason? Because he's owed $30 million next year. And you're trying, maybe you deal him for an expiring contract. So this is all these things add up to, yes, the Heat are trying to compete right now, but they're also trying to build for the future, whether it's trying to have cap space next offseason or just trying to add picks or add young talent, where they're thinking more big picture and long term than they did when Jimmy Butler was on the roster and they were trying to win a championship every season.
So let's look at the training camp is what, September?
Yeah, late September.
Okay, so if you are in the Heat's front office, what is on their to-do list between now and September?
I mean, it's crazy to say this, but
I'm talking contract-wise too.
Yeah. No, their roster is almost full. With the first-round pick, they have now 13 players under either guaranteed or partially guaranteed contracts, and your limit is 15 for the regular season. Duncan Robinson has a decision to make by Sunday. He has an early termination option in his contract of $9.8 million that he could exercise and become an unrestricted free agent. The expectation is he will probably not do that because $9.8 million guaranteed sounds nice. And then from there, the Heat have a decision to make on their end.
Tell our fans, okay, 9.8 if he's terminated. What does he make if he's not?
If he's terminated, if he exercises the early termination option, nothing is guaranteed, and he just becomes a free agent.
Okay.
If he doesn't use the early termination option, he remains in the Heat's books for next year. $9.8 million of his $19.8 million salary for next season is guaranteed. So basically half of it's guaranteed. And then from there, the Heat has until July 8th to decide whether they want to guarantee the full salary of $19.8 million, the additional $10 million that's not guaranteed, or they could waive him and save $10 million.
Okay.
So they're kind of right now waiting for Duncan because Duncan does have the first decision to make, and then from there, the Heat has a decision to make.
Okay, so you got Duncan on your to-do list. Who else is on your to-do list?
Davion Mitchell, right? You extended a qualifying offer to him. He's going to be a restricted free agent. We'll see what kind of offer sheet he gets. The Heat could technically agree to a contract with him ahead of free agency because you can negotiate now with your own free agents ahead of free agency. So could they come to terms with Davion before free agency and not kind of risk it? Yes. But also he could test the market and try to put pressure on the Heat to match it. They do have his bird rights, which helps, but they are pretty up against the luxury tax. And not to get too into the weeds and to get our audience to fall asleep, but they've been in the tax the last 2 years for 2 play-in teams. If you're in the tax again this year for a third straight year with a team that could be in the play-in again, then you're up against the repeater tax, which is very punitive, very expensive, and really limits you with what you can do with the roster. So you do not want to be in the repeater tax. Really, the only teams that would even think about being in the repeater tax is like the Celtics if they won back-to-back championships, where you're like you have a championship team already, and you're just trying to extend the window. You don't go into the tax for a play-in team or mediocre team. So they're going to try to get into the tax.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. They won last year. Yeah. They're up against it, and look what they got rid of. I mean, They got rid of Porzingis and Drew Holiday.
The question is if Tatum didn't get hurt, would they have done that, right? Because maybe they can continue to try to extend the window. Maybe they shave off a little bit of salary just to lower the bill a little bit, but they might not be as drastic of moves. But yeah, that is something the Heat will have to do. They're going to try to get into the tax this year. They almost have to. There's no reason why they should be in the tax for a third straight year for this roster. So that whether that means cutting Duncan before July 8 and saving $10 million to open up room to sign Davion Mitchell and not go over the tax, maybe that's one way. Or that means trading Andrew Wiggins' contract or Terry Rozier's contract for a cheaper contract to create more room under the tax. Maybe that's one way to do it. But they are going to have to make some moves if they want to bring back Davion, most likely, and stay under the tax. So those are the big things really at this point.
Would you bring him back?
I would if the money's right. If it's $10 million a year, I think I would do it. If it's closer to the full mid-level of 14, I would probably really have to think about it. Especially when you think about you're adding money to the 2026 books, which is next offseason when the Heat have been planning to have this max level space. But you're then committing $14 million of that to Davion Mitchell. That's a lot, and that's going to be a decision. We're going to see how far the Heat is willing to go to play Davion. He just had the best stretch of his career with Miami. We know there's mutual interest. He likes being in Miami. He's here in the offseason. He liked this, the 2 months or 3 months he was with the Heat. The Heat value him and what he brings. Obviously, his defensive mentality, they value that. But yeah, the money has to work out. So we'll see. That's going to be really interesting. restricted free agents now, it's different than it was in prior years. I think the last restricted free agent to get an offer sheet was like DeAndre Ayton in like 2021. There aren't many offer sheets extended anymore. But there could be with Davion because he's not as expensive as a player as most restricted free agents. They get like max salary. So we'll see. But it is interesting. It's kind of hard to expect really what he's going to get out there. Hard to predict. So I think he'll be back just because there's mutual interest, but definitely not a lock yet.
Okay. So we're talking the Duncan Robinson decision. We're talking Davion Mitchell decision.
And trying to shed some salary.
And then the shedding the salary between you can talk about Wiggins and you can talk about the expiring contract of Rozier. So it may seem like it's the dead time, but it's not. And also coming up is Summer League and Rookie League, which the Heat always seems to find guys. I mean, last year we weren't mentioning
defending champions, defending Summer League champions. I mean, I
don't think that's the one they want, but yes. But last year at this time we weren't saying anything. Hey, that second round pick, Pella Larson. Yeah, we think he might be able. No one was saying anything. So always look for the Heat to unearth someone that we haven't heard of, that the casual basketball fan hasn't heard of. We know you know all and tell all, Mr. Oracle. But for those who don't, I'm sure there'll be names we mention, and we're still waiting for word from the Godfather. So you never know what's going to happen. But as it does happen, and free agency starts July 1st, is that correct?
Negotiations can start June 30th, which is Monday at 6 p.m. And then it officially starts like July 1st. And deals can then start being signed July 1st. And then most deals can start being signed July 6th. So really the start of next week, Monday, it all begins.
So though we don't expect a ton, it's the Heat.
You never know.
So anything can happen.
Yeah.
We're used to that. But if it does happen, keep yourself locked here. You can go to MiamiHerald.com. We'll be back to comment on anything that's breaking. But yes, stay with us. We'll make sure. Greg Cody had a line in his column today. He was like, hey, it looks like what's happening off season is just as interesting or more interesting. And we will find out. But if it is, we'll be here. So for Anthony Chang, I'm John Devine. Stay with us, and we will see you next time.